me hand over to Francois Mezina, a strategic working group co-chair. Francois has 30 years experience in payment activities and today as payment specialist for Total Energies. He is also a long-term contributor to the International Forecourt Standards Forum, of which he has been president since 2020. And in addition to all this, he participates in the European Cards Stakeholders Group. So let me pass across to you, Francois.
Hello, everybody. Merci, Sarah. I'm more than happy to have about 45 minutes to talk about the strategic working group. And before that, I would like to have just one thought about Claude Brun, who was a great contributor to what Nexo is today. With his devoted time and energy for the association, I believe the result we have today and described by Patrice, and with, I would say, a great future. Thank you, Claude, for your great contribution on Nexo. So, whoops, I need to control better. That's it. So the agenda, just to recall what is the mission of the strategic working group. We'll take a look at the global payment trends that is driving the working group, in fact. We will refer quickly to the Nexo standard scope expansion and have a fast track to rethink new interactions and deploy new payment services, what is in front of us, improve the time to market in verticals, some examples, and what's next. Well, the strategic working group mission is a kind of think tank committee. All the representatives of the board and the principal members can participate into this committee. And let's say all the topics can be treated. There are no borders. We can talk about new features to be enhanced or to be added to the existing standards. We can talk about also the organization of the association and its evolution. Really, there is no borders, as I say in this title, to all the topics that can be treated. Of course, all the decisions have to be in line with the bylaws of the association, but we can be also promoters to new ideas, innovations that would drive us to modify, for instance, the bylaws, as we did recently with its extension, as Patrice described. And of course, the strategic working group is not a decision committee. It's providing support to the board to take potentially decisions for the association. So it's a kind of think tank committee, as I said. No limits, no borders to deal with any topic that regards the perimeter of Nexo. Let's take a look at the global trends, payment trends. I did retrieve a recent report from Capgemini, from their World Payments Report, and I believe this was quite interesting to share with you today. If you look at 2016 figures, of number of transactions being processed, electronic payment transactions being processed in 2016, it was below 500 billion transactions a year. When you look at the figures in 2020, it nearly doubled, even though in 2020 we had that terrible pandemic crisis that did affect worldwide the economy. But if you look at the forecast given by Capgemini, the trend is still the same, which is about 2 digits increase, with even nearly 20% increase over the next 5 years, multiplying by more than 2 the volume of non-cash transactions between 2020 and 2025. What does it mean for Nexo, I believe? It means that we are at the right place, shall I say, to provide standards to the industry, because the industry will look for more and more standards to process all those various payment means that are today present and those that we don't know tomorrow. And looking at exactly the same figures still from Capgemini, what is interesting is that between 2020, if I'm not mistaken, 2016, sorry, I will take this one, and 2025 as a forecast, it's the proportion of instant payments or e-money instruments that will increase drastically, showing or representing a good quarter of the volume of electronic transactions in 2025. So Nexo started to be first a card-based payment standard for interoperability, and there's still things to be done, and I will talk about it later on. But we need also to take into account those alternative, shall I say, means of payments that are coming in, just to guarantee that all the payment actors for which the acceptors that I do represent can deal with in the best possible conditions. I wanted to show that last slide from Capgemini also about key regulatory and industry initiatives. Well, I won't go into the detail of that slide. I will let you take a look at, or please, yes, take a look at the report in detail. But just to emphasize two words that I wanted to share with you, and where I believe Nexo is clearly concerned by, is about standardization and innovation. Clearly here, Nexo is really at the right place, at the right moment, to contribute to the evolution of those standards and be part of the innovations, integrating them into the various standards we produce. It means that there's a lot of work to be provided still by the association. And here we, the strategic working group, we need to recommend, let's say, the board, where to put maybe our priorities within the next coming 3 to 5 years, just to be sure we're not missing what, let's say, the market is expecting. If I say standardization, I will take maybe instant payment that can be part of. There's another about innovation. I won't talk about the wallets, of course, but the QR code to be processed, open APIs, open for the open banking. So many elements that I believe Nexo can be the basket to offer standards to the industry. Another element provided by Stéphane Joseph from Crédit Agricole, it's an extract of one of their reports, where we can see something very interesting here between 2020 and 2024. It's also a forecast, of course, is that the cash volume of transactions will leave the place in some proportion to the wallet payments at POS. The proportion of credit cards and debit cards remaining more or less the same. Here, meaning that here again, Nexo has to probably focus on mobile payments. We already did because there is a mobile working group. But here again, it's interesting to see the trends and just to be sure that Nexo is always aligned with the market. That's another slide where we could get inspired to understand where we should invest on. Just to show in more detail, thank you, Claren, there are different bubbles. You've got, for the horizontal line, the revenues growth rate for electronic payments. And on the vertical line, you have the economy, the growth of the economy. So the green bubble from China should be blue like the others, like the other blue ones. What is interesting is that along with the growth rate of payment revenue comes the growth rate of electronic payments. There's a kind of relation, not to say correlation. So the size of the bubbles indicates the amount of income from payments, and we see that China clearly is drawn by Alipay and WeChat Pay. For the developed countries, for instance, UK, US, France, they have a growth rate of electronic payments below 10%, although transactions amount remain high. And for the emerging countries, generally, they start to have electronic payments growth rate of about 10% and over and above, characterized by the adoption of digital payment methods and the rise of e-commerce and marketplace. There are different markets, not as mature as US, UK, or France, for instance. So for Nexo, in this kind of observation we do make, it shows that, let's say, worldwide, there's certainly, it's not most probably, there is certainly a need of standardization, integrating innovations here. And most probably, Nexo should look where, as a matter of fact, there is a great traction of electronic payments to grow rapidly, and to say where maybe the board and its members, shall I say, should invest in which region, where should we look for new members, new contributors to take into account their local needs, shall I say, into our Nexo standards. So it's an interesting chart here again to help us to think of where and how we should shall I say, invest. So the expansion of Nexo. Well, Patrice mentioned it in his introduction. We modified the bylaws of the association, which was oriented card-based from its beginning. Now, with the new bylaws, we do allow us, in a way, to look beyond cards, shall I say, and see what are the alternative payments respect to cards that should be taken into account by Nexo. Already mentioned instant payment, mobility, wallets, and you were able to see in the previous slides that the trend is not going to decrease for the time being, or at least for the next 5 to 10 years. I'm convinced that it's going to change. We could imagine that maybe 5 years ago, contactless payment would gain a great success onto the market. That's an example where things are changing so quickly. And maybe the challenge for Nexo here is to have the ability to bring to the market rapidly those new standards, taking into account the new payment means. So Nexo Standards has demonstrated its capabilities to change again to meet the new market demands. In fact, yes, by modifying the bylaws, we've managed to show to the market that we can adapt ourselves, taking into account new conditions. And I think that's a great success. It was not an easy exercise. And shall I say, the exercise is not finished still. For the card-based payment, we're still under, let's say, heavy works, heavy contributions to always enhance the standard, enrich it with the latest updates required by the market. I think about security, for instance, that is, let's say, changing every day and improving every day. It's one of them, but also the various habits or customer journeys that we need to integrate in. So card-based payment remains the core of the activity of Nexo, but now we have the ability to look also for the others And then it's a question for the board that is taking the decisions where to put, let's say, its energy. Well, it doesn't prevent anyhow some contributors to bring elements to the associations, maybe with some already existing pieces of standard that could be easily integrated into the standards. So we should not restrain to what we stick to. Any innovation that can be brought by any member, of course, is more than welcome. Clearly, and that's one important thing, Nexo wants to be the reference standard body in the payment acceptance area. I think the goal that I believe Patrice introduced also today is that we want to be the reference. And with what we did until now, the fact that we are ISO 20022 based, clearly we have a very good asset, and it's shown by the figures on the market of how many billions of transactions are processed every year within Nexo, I mean standards, that it's going to grow still. There was an interesting presentation made by Arnaud Cruzet from Fin, showing the interest of the ISO 20022 and especially on the Nexo standard 4. So it's really promising. What we're doing today is really contributing positively for the future here. Here, just an illustration of how big is the perimeter we need to cover here. For the customer interactions, now it's got so many opportunities, let's say, to process a payment. And it touches so many environments, so many blocks, from the staff empowerment to the invisible checkout, through the web to store, the social media, progressive web app rise, that's for me fairly new, marketplace, mobility, and contextualization. I believe that all of you do understand those, let's say, concepts, more or less. But we need to take that into account clearly. This is part of what the strategy working group should be working on. We did work for some years on the mobile payment, for instance, where from the strategic working group we did create the mobile payment working group. We also initiated the transit payment, for which there is also a working group there to take that into account. We had also initiated the e-commerce, let's say, working group to verify and just to be certain that we're not missing any customer journey to be inserted into the existing standards. This is an illustration of what the strategic working group is working on, and then transfers to the board, and as a consequence to the various then existing working groups or creating new working groups, the topics to be treated here. So Nexo clearly, by this slide, has to develop standards to cover all these use cases from the customer point of view. Having a customer starting, let's say, an action of selecting products on the web and then go to the store or vice versa. I mean, there's so many ways where at the end there's a payment action to be taken into account. There it is. Nexo is at the right place to provide to the market what is necessary for. Here to deploy new payment services as a fast track, what could be taken into account for the next coming years to be developed? For instance, deferred payment is one of them, but also one-click payment or zero-click payment could be taken care of. Of course, the chatbot payment is also one of them. I don't talk about voice and facial payment, where here security elements are involved, very complex. There is instant and account-to-account payments also to be taken care of. So all those new payment services most probably require standards. There are some existing ones probably. We need to see, and that's one of the comments the strategic working group makes very often, is we should not reinvent the wheel whenever there is an existing standard that covers very well, let's say, the business needs. And here it's just to think of, is this existing standard, let's say, compatible with what we produce? Or shall we integrate it into ours, or shall we interface with? So there are various options all the time, and it is to be discussed what should be the best, of course. And I believe the driver should be to deliver as soon as possible, to be time to market to the industry what could be expected with. So that's another axle where we should look at. So emerging verticals. That's an example where we should put also our efforts on. One of them is the tap on phone, for instance, where until now, Nexo, being card-based oriented, was very much concerned by payment devices, traditional ones with the famous chip and pin journey. Now there are technical solutions with, let's say, cloud solutions, especially integrating security, that allow tap on phone. It's not new, it's not recent. It does exist for some years now. But that's also probably another trend to be taken into account by Nexo. Well, most probably the standards we have must evolve and take into account this kind of new journey. What do we do here? What do we provide? Until now, it was very much oriented, let's say, and starting from the payment device in interaction with a card or mobile in NFC, for instance. What happens with a tap on phone? It changes completely, let's say, the paradigm on how to process a payment on proximity world. Imagine just to download an app on a merchant point of view that will allow you to accept contactless payments with your cell phone as a merchant. That's a drastic change. But what is really changing, or what is really not changing? What Nexo should take into account here? That's an example. Already talked about open payment and transit. I believe here the requirement or the expectations of the market is rather high. There's a lot of competition because there are so many initiatives, and probably that's one of the challenges for Nexo to become an international interoperable standard that covers all the specificity, shall I say, but in one and unique standard. That's really the biggest challenge we need to go through. Ongoing works, we have ongoing works on this topic. That is probably based on, let's say, the expectations of the current societies, where the mobility is pushed very hard by, let's say, the governments and the states to abandon the car and to go to public transportations, making an easy life to the travelers, not to have to, let's say, break their trip because they have to pay or get recognized, but to have a kind of payment seamless trip. That's one of the goal where Nexo could provide a standard solution for. There's not last but not least, of course, e-commerce, we call it a vertical, is while we were card-based and initially on proximity payment, how the nexo standard can cope with E&M commerce, let's say, expectations, with their specific rules, with and respecting what is already existing here. Here again, a lot has been done already. Things are already, let's say, in place. It's again here the challenge for the market itself to move towards this new standard little by little, but for sure to give the ability to the market and the various actors on the market to quickly and easily implement E&M commerce transactions wherever they are. So this is just an illustration of verticals here. So what's next? Sorry, for the strategic working group. One thing which is not indifferent is if I'm currently the co-chair of the strategic working group, after the departure of Régis Massiquin, that was next to me on that role, well, there is a vacant seat. So please do candidate to that position and send your let's say your will to our General Secretary Jacques Soussana. That will be more than happy to receive your interest in contributing to that strategic working group as a co-chair. It's just to say that the co-chairs do, let's say, lead the working group, lead the discussions, and report to the board what was agreed at the working group, and it's worth to be part of that journey, shall I say. Currently, we are developing a long-term strategy, taking into consideration, of course, the external trends, as I explained, but also internal organization. We are currently under the process of providing to the board a mid-long-term strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. We started the work about a month ago. It's an ongoing work, an ongoing process. But through this exercise, it's, as a matter of fact, taking into account, let's say, our current assets, our added values, taking into account also our, let's say, weak points, if any, that should be strengthened, and propose to the board, taking into account what is the trend of the market also, what should be, let's say, the vision for the next 3 years, but practically speaking. So it's an ongoing work, as I said, and hopefully by the end of this year, we should have a conclusion to be presented to the board and then to be shared, of course, to all the members. Of course, within that work of the strategic working group, as I just mentioned, we need to write a kind of roadmap, always to be approved by the board. I will repeat always that, for implementations and prioritizations of verticals. We need to be very pragmatic here and suggest to the board what is really realistic. We should not, let's say, imagine things that have no interest, practically speaking, currently on the market. We really need to focus on what is the demand and prioritize it, of course. And here again, I will repeat myself, but if any one of you is willing to have the standard to take into account the specific requirement, let's say, don't hesitate to come to us and say, I'm looking for a standardization action on whatever topic, and we will take it into account and report it to the board if none of the existing working groups wouldn't take it into account. So if it's clearly legitimate and there's no discussion, there's no reason why we should not take it into account. The only problem is the question of priorities. But don't hesitate to contact us here. So, not to finish with, but yes, the strategic working group was somehow an initiator of what was beyond counts, saying that we should open the standards we produce to alternative means of payments. It's been a long process to achieve that goal, to open the bylaws, but we made it because we are changing, let's say, maybe habits or not priorities, but it's making it more difficult to embrace, let's say, all the various roles we need to serve. But I think I was convinced personally that it was important to make it happen because what we can see is that electronic payments, not only cards, but all the various means of payments around, are developing very quickly. And I showed you the figures about what is the trend expected for the next coming years. When you look at the past, the trend is really strong still. If I were to sum up, it's nearly 20% growth every year, except in 2020 because of the pandemic. So we need to take those elements into account and position Nexo in a condition to last long, of course. That's the interest. So for sure, within the next coming weeks, we're going to set a new meeting to have that think tank approach and to decide within the committee what should be proposed to the board for the next coming years. Voila, I believe I'm at the end with some anticipation to the initial planning. I hope I didn't talk too fast. And I believe, Sarah, that we may have some questions.
We do, Francois. So thank you for that. It's always very inspiring to hear what the future holds. I think so many bodies and organisations, they promote and look at what they're doing today. So to have that future vision is really inspiring. We have questions, quite a few questions, as we would expect. So I'm going to start easy, just to give you a chance to get your thoughts together. So first of all, how can people actually contribute to the work of the strategic work group? What's the process to actually become part of these discussions?
Well, they can reach out, of course, our General Secretary, Jacques Souzana, with all the team. There is also Normand Provost, who's the liaison with so many bodies. So Jacques, Normand, and also Santiago, I should say, with, of course, the chairman, Patrice, to get in touch with. And being part of the strategic working group as a co-chair, they can also contact me with no problem. So they can reach us out whenever they are willing to treat about a topic. As I said, that can be about a practical context where they're looking for some improvements within the standard and they feel like they need some strong promotion because maybe not in the direct scope of, let's say, a short-term activity or any other kind of, let's say, thinking or thoughts they might have. I will refer to, I will take an example of Thierry Leblond from Patrick Vachbeau Consulting Company, who's a member, and he was willing to share with the strategic working group what is about the request to pay or open banking, let's say, topics. And it was a fruitful exchange about it. And there it is. It then came out to a clear action, even though I believe that some members of the strategic working group were having more accurate vision of what was going on. And potentially not now, but nexo within the next coming months might say no, we need to reactivate that topic, for instance. So there's no bad or good topic to be treated at a strategic working group. If there is a topic, we need to deal with. There's no limitation here. So contact the permanent members or myself with my future co-chair in case there is an idea you're willing to develop.
Perfect. That's brilliant. And that's we also had the question about how can you provide or influence on this topic that the committees are addressing. So once a topic is live, is that the same process for people to engage to actually influence topics that are developing by you guys?
Well,
or do they tend to then be shifted into the work groups?
Exactly. So the process is this one. So whenever a topic is considered with a consensus within the strategic working group to be brought to the board, we bring it to the board. We might refer, during, let's say, our analysis prior to the board, we might refer to the technical steering committee, for instance. That is the technical branch, let's say, of the nexo association to confirm or not if, for instance, a requirement is not or is already covered. Okay. But then when it is decided or approved to take into account what is requested, then either the TSC or whatever the other working groups that are involved or that are concerned will be let's say reached and will take into account what was decided by the board. So the strategic working group is not a technical body. Is not a doer. Of course, we have the ability to understand the various technical processes because we need to be in a position to discuss. The TSC, of course, is part of the strategic working group. At least their co-chairs are present at the strategic working group. It allows us to have interactive answers whenever we might have some questions about whatever new topic that is brought. But that's it. Whenever the board has validated an idea or concept or suggestion made by the strategic working group, then it's the working group itself that takes it into account and it is put in priorities and then followed by the various groups and the board at the end.
Brilliant. Okay, so there's lots of opportunities there for sure. Okay, Francois, how can fintechs help in enhancing nexo standards? What role can fintechs play in the work that you're doing?
I believe they could bring tremendous contributions. Nexo is an association where let's say the standards that are being produced is the result of initiatives of its members. Okay, so fintechs they have methods that are how shall I say different from what we are currently using. Saying here at the association, we're working by consensus. We listen to our members to what they do expect. We need to deliver them things. There are strong expectations, and I will repeat myself again here. There are expectations about cards, especially. That was the initial scope of the association, but now it's beyond cards. For the fintechs as such, the fintechs may deal with cards or alternative payments, and for sure, they are working already in an area that Nexo didn't touch until now, until very recently. But if they believe, and I'm sure they can have interest in Nexo by bringing not their assets but their concepts that they are certain to be valuable for the association, not for themselves only, but for all the market, they can come. If it's a topic that is not covered by the association today, of course they can get their let's say their subject to be introduced through the strategic working group, but here again through the various persons I just mentioned early on. But yes, clearly fintechs with, let's say, their new technologies, their innovations they bring to the market for payments are more than welcome. Uh, they have to be convinced of one thing is that ISO 20022, and I'm convinced personally, is the future for payments. It's
Right.
already
Yeah.
covering instant payment. I mean, direct debit and credit transfers. Okay, the cards are based. I mean, through Nexo, based also on ISO 20022, and I believe all the alternative payment means that did came to the market not based for sure on ISO 20022. That's the challenge for the market, and I will take my hat of an acceptor as a merchant. A
Hmm.
merchant
Hmm.
cannot deal with many points of interaction to deal with various means of payments because it will cost him as many pot of interactions as many means of payments is willing to accept. So the idea is to have, and I believe Nexo, and that's my idea, and here again I need to share with my board colleagues and the strategic working group is to say, let's have one unique point of interaction that can deal with all those various payment means. And that's the challenge, that's the difficulty, because you've got legacy systems, legacy processes, we've got new ones next to it, they don't merge naturally one to
No.
another one and that's the challenge. I mean, if we were to come back to what is the benefits, what are the benefits of standards, is to be able to save money for operations, to be time to market, and and Nexo is providing that to the market by applying Nexo standards. You do save money because you have an interoperable standard available that can deal with and cope with many means of payments. Of course, our challenge as, let's say, Nexo Association is to be able to bring into the existing standards what is expected by the market in a short time period, because there are so many ways. I mean, while in Europe, North America, we are oriented with cards, historically speaking. If you deal with Asia or Africa, the context is completely different. And I showed the figures, you remember, with the bubbles,
Yes.
where in Asia, most probably the wallet payments are as strong, shall I say, as the historical counts,
Circle.
while in
Hmm.
Africa, the counts have a much lower footprint on the region. But on the other hand, mobile to mobile payment is also very successful. And there is no reason why Nexo, as a standard body for interoperability of payments, should not
Hmm.
be able to cope with all these various means all over those different regions. So the fintechs, to come back to your questions, clearly they are more than welcome to join us to bring their expertise, because of course it will make success of Nexo, but will make also their success to what they can provide to the market, because Nexo is also becoming very, let's say, popular all over the world.
Yeah, which actually brings me quite nicely into another question that's been asked, which is how do you decide on the topics that should be addressed by Nexo standards? You showed a wealth of data at the start of your presentation, and you've just spoken there as well about, you know, the different players, the different regions. So how are you deciding with the board on what you can cover and what you can't? Because I'm assuming you have defined resources.
That's how to say, that's a key question for the
Yeah.
association. Not the one to decide. It is the board to decide. But clearly today, let's say the output given by Nexo is provided by its members. Okay, we don't have, let's say, full permanent staff to produce standards.
Hmm.
Okay, it is the standards do change, evolve, are created by our members through the various working groups. So clearly, when we look at what is in front of us, and as I said at the very beginning, talking about the mission of the strategic working group, we deal with all topics around the association. So not only what are the new use cases to be introduced in the standards, but how do we get organized with? So we do ask, not ask, but we do suggest to the board to take into account, as a matter of fact, what we, the strategic working group, recommend to be priorities, and then we need to decide what should be done to cope with those new requests to be covered with.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly, I don't know if we are a cornerstone of the life of the association to say, shall we remain, let's say, amateur in the noble sense of the word, good artisan, handcraft, you say in English, or do we become much more professional, having permanent staff into? It's an ongoing discussion here because, of course, it changes the way the association works
Of
and
course,
lives.
yes.
So today we haven't made that change. Shall we
Mm-hmm.
make the change? But making the change, it would change somehow significantly the way the association is organized. We haven't dealt with, I mean, we've already talked about it during various boards. Um, we need to have the majority to decide such a thing because it's not indifferent. There were until now so much to be done about the initial scope of the association, which is payment cards. We need to so we need to measure, let's say, constantly where we are, what we can do, and what we can afford also. Because to have permanent staff changes also the conditions of the association. It's
Of
not
course.
indifferent. And how many permanent people do we need? Do we need one, two, three, five, 10 people, depending on how much and for how long? So it's not an easy path. Most probably through the current strategic working plan we're running through the strategic working group, we might come again to that question is how do we get organized to cope with those various priorities? How do we set them? One answer, of course, is that you mentioned the fintechs or any member, not only the fintechs, from the various sectors, categories that do represent the association, if they're willing to come to some, let's say, elements that can contribute rapidly to be integrated in the existing standards, better it is, easier it is. And we've been working like that until now. That's the process. It's the contribution of each of its members. So yes, we do have that topic. It's often on the table.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenged. Nothing is closed.
Okay, excellent. No, so with such a wide breadth of different topics as well, with the bylaws expanding, it's an interesting thing for you guys to look going forward. So another question, beyond the EU, where do you see Nexo working strategically to help local markets develop?
It's a very good question, but very difficult answer, Sarah. I don't know who did raise that
I don't.
question.
I'm just the question asker at this point. I've just got another screen up. So, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
if
I've got a question, but the answer is so complex. What the association should focus on. I believe all the markets, all of them, are willing to set new payment systems that
Mhm,
can cope with the next years, not to say decades. Um, I can witness through my company, that is an international company, that there are some requirements of settling new payment means or new payment acceptance means. Uh, following strictly the most recent standards, clearly. And
mhm.
Nexo is part of their thinkings whenever they think to implement. Where should Nexo focus on? well, I mentioned Asia. Our let's say our board colleague, not board colleague, but our principal member, Alipay, is an example that where most probably their contribution to the nexo standards evolutions is expected because they have a deep knowledge of this, let's say, payment method, QR code based, different from the QR code promoted by EMVCo that should be naturally integrated into Nexo standards. But it's another way of processing payments for which Nexo has to deal with because, as I said, payment counts, and that's the history, as a great success all over the world, even though more or less frequently used depending on the regions. It's already a good base. But we know that in some regions it's not the case. They represent a minority of electronic payments, and others are much stronger, are much more present. So I mentioned Asia, but what about Africa? Emerging countries where the expectations of transaction is, let's say, increasing a lot, and for which I believe Nexo is really the best investment they could make for their near future. But how to get in touch with those local players, regional players, because the payment anyhow is very much fragmented, always controlled by the governments, and we can understand that. So it's not an easy process, easy path, and to decide where to go, I don't know. I know that until recently, I mean, not until, but recently we had Mir to join the association, the Russian Payment Association, join Nexo in Russia. I mentioned Alipay, Saudi Arabian local payment, let's say, scheme joined the association for a while now. So there's maybe one region where we don't have much representatives, but Norman will correct me if I'm wrong. It's South America. We have, I believe, low impact on this region of the world. Should we focus on this region? I don't believe so. We have so much to do already. So much to do already.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. And it sounds like
sorry.
you've got really strong reach.
Yeah. So the point is, it's difficult. I cannot answer to your question to which region we should focus on. Of course, we need to bring that topic to the board and decide where shall we put our effort in terms of communication, in terms of promotion, just to be sure that we can bring into the association new members. Let's say with, let's say not new ideas, but of course new ideas and innovations, but to be ready to integrate our standards.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. No, it was a difficult question. So I'm going to move on. We've got two more questions that I kind of, maybe we can bring these slightly together, very much looking at markets and trends. With regards to mobile acceptance, do you have a roadmap for having Nexo ready to support this massive new trend?
Well, there are various mobile acceptance use cases. So the mobile acceptance emulating an EMV card, for me, Nexo covers it very well through contactless payments. So for me, this is well covered. While there are new use cases, and I will talk about energies and electric vehicle chargers, where the market has to integrate the traditional payment card systems, probably with contactless more than with chip and pin. So this is to be integrated with. So yeah, can you recall me your question size?
No worries. So it's with regards to mobile acceptance, do you have a roadmap for having Nexo ready to support this massive new trend?
So and then there is the other mobile way, which is the in-app application into the mobile that has nothing to do with the traditional accounts for which we need to connect with. And how do we work on that? And we are touching here probably E&M commerce environment where we have maybe an in-app or an app-to-app relation to make the payment itself. But here again, we are at the border is where Nexo should work in. Shall Nexo invest into standardizing an app-to-app or an in-app to integrate a new payment mean, wallet-based, shall I say, or mobile-based? So as you can see, the topics are so numerous. And that's the difficulty for Nexo, as a matter of
Of
fact, for the board to
course.
decide where should we invest, because we don't have all those resources.
So my next question then, very much in the same vein, is Nexo looking at cryptocurrencies? Is that on the agenda?
Not yet. I mean, at the strategic working group, I don't believe we did refer to, because I was at the origin of the strategic working group already as a co-chair with Stéphane Jacqui, that left the company. We're not touching that topic today. But clearly, if there is a strong demand on the market to deal with cryptocurrencies as an alternative mean of payment, we will have to go
Cool.
for
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
No choice. I mean, it's we are somehow driven by the market. So, of course, yeah, why not? But we would then touch here a very complex environment of payment, because the cryptocurrencies makes it complex, even though we would be dealing at the acceptance point, the point of interaction here, because this is our DNA. We're dealing with acceptance, okay, of means of payments. So how our standard Nexo, based on ISO 20022, could cope with cryptocurrencies? For the time being, there's no strong, I mean, until now, from our members, there was no strong will to introduce that concept. First of all, it was impossible before the new bylaws. And since then, for the time being, this subject hasn't been reached or raised, sorry.
And we must remember the new bylaws were only approved early this year. So considering it's such a short time frame, I think a lot of work's already been done to actually start mapping out what the future looks like for Nexo with those new bylaws in place. So as you say, it just gives you that flexibility to look at all these opportunities going forward.
Yes, it's too recent to have time to really think of.
To
And
have an
here again,
answer
we
to
need some,
everything.
yeah, and we need some specialists in cryptocurrencies, because it's such a specific, let's say, niche of payment.
Of course. So the last question, Francois, I really appreciate your
Oof.
time, because I know we've gone over on your section, but can you please let us, the members, know how they are stayed updated and informed about the subjects that you guys are tackling, what you're looking at? So what is the mechanism for you to be updating people on the progress that's being made and what's being decided at the strategic work group level?
I believe that's a very, very good question, because until now, the strategic working group was producing minutes that was oriented to its participants and to the board, as a matter of fact, but there was no much publicity on what are the topics being taken into consideration for discussions. And this comment is very much valuable, I think, and I will see with my board colleagues how we can maybe on the website, for instance, or through an email to the various members, not giving all the details, but at least all the various topics that are going to be treated or have been treated during the various strategic working group meetings. As a matter of fact, to keep live the members about what's going on and to have them react on. So I like very much this question, because it shows that, and very often, a lack of, let's say, proper communications, properly oriented towards all our members here. So I take the point, and I'm sure we are going to discuss it at the board. for sure at the strategic working group, how to set it organized and make a proposal to the board to make it in action.
So watch this space. That's the key thing there.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't have the answer, but there can be various forms. Is we do update the our how do you call that? Our web page
The
to say
website. Yeah.
the website to say here are the various topics under review by the strategic working group, what potentially was approved, what are the next coming topics. Maybe we should open maybe a kind of forum. I was initially at the beginning of the speech, I was saying it's a think tank. Maybe we should try and organize the kind of dedicated area on the website to have the ability to have all of our members to be able to react on and make suggestions, and potentially outside members whenever they're willing to exchange. Why not? I like it very much because I believe people are questioning themselves sometimes about nexo. Is it valuable, not valuable? What are the various topics? And maybe it's a way also to promote the association, to give the ability to exchange and give them maybe more visibility still to what already we can provide and what we are about to provide tomorrow.
Brilliant. Well, Francois, thank you so much for your time today to share all these insights with the group and to also do a very extended Q&A session with me. We had a lot of questions coming in. So if people have asked more questions and we haven't quite got to them, we will get back to you guys in writing.